Hi everyone, it's Carolyn Brown here. Welcome to my presentation. In this, I'm going to give you some findings of big data research. So research that comes from tracking of millions of job applications. I'm also going to be giving you findings of actual research of recruiters. So what I hope you can take away from my presentation is that you'll be able to apply some of these findings to help you find your next great job. What I find with my clients is that there's a lot of spray and pray that goes on when you apply for a job. But if you actually understand how the numbers work and what the research tells you, you should be able to apply this to make your job search more efficient and target your search in areas that are actually going to have the maximum impact. In this presentation, I'm also going to throw the curtains open to the Straight to Shortlist challenge, which I've been talking about quite a lot on my blog, and you would have received some of my emails. Now, the process that I give you in the Straight to Shortlist challenge is a process that you could follow to maximize your chances of finding a job and use the numbers. So I've had a lot of questions about the challenge, so I'm opening the curtains to explain how it works and how you can ramp up your chances of finding your next great job. So my background, so you know where I come from in all of this. I'm the founder of Interview IQ. I founded Interview IQ back in 2010. I am a former recruitment consultant and manager. I've looked after recruitment practices in the public and private sector for large organisations, for small organisations. In my business, I've helped hundreds of people find satisfying jobs. My clients tend to be senior to C-suite professionals. And white collar is a broad description. So more office-based than outside is probably a great way to describe them. I've also the founder of one of Australia's most popular career blogs, and you've probably read a lot of my articles, and that's perhaps why you're here. And I've created a lot of consulting engagements and jobs for myself. So the information that I'm about to give you comes from my experience. I've tested it myself. I've tested it with my clients. It works. So that's the background. That's my background and where I'm coming from. Now, some of my clients have landed jobs in amazing places, and this is just a snapshot of that. So organisations large and small, public and private sector, tier 1 organisations, not-for-profit, people from organisations that range from Chanel, IBM, Qantas, Hudson, Westpac, St Vinny's, the CBA, State Library of Victoria, all sorts of places. So again, the information that I'm giving you comes from helping people navigate the job search process and land jobs in amazing places. Now, I have to warn you that I do bad slides and I do bad dad jokes. So just be prepared for a few of those thrown in during this. And okay. So I want to ask you is if this is you right now, you're probably watching this because you're feeling very frustrated about your job search. So you've applied for a lot of jobs and your resume has disappeared down a big black hole. You've gone for a number of interviews and you've not landed the job. You've gone for a number of interviews and you've been ghosted by a recruiter. Or you're just finding the whole process frustrating about where to even start. It's not, I think what happens when you look for a job is the frustration is magnified for you because most people act out of pain. So what I mean by that with your job search is that very rarely do I see people say, it's time, I've mapped out my career, I'm casting the net over to the next side for my next great opportunity. And that is what I describe as like moving towards, your change is driven in that you're feeling great about yourself and you're moving towards something even greater. That's not human nature. Human nature is that often we don't act until we absolutely have to. And especially when, you know, our financial security is at stake, it's a fundamental human need. So you might be looking for a job because you have to. So there's a restructure at work, your position's been made redundant, you can't stand the management anymore, can't stand the team, you're in the wrong fit, but you absolutely have to make a move. And what that means is that you're entering into the job market, you're sticking your resume out there, and you're not feeling great about yourself, but you have to present yourself in a certain way. You have to sell yourself. So it's very, excuse me, I've got a bit of a frog in my throat. It's very easy to feel extremely frustrated in this process and find it difficult to see the positive in anything and put yourself forward. So it can actually feel like you biting the keyboard. So I suspect a lot of you will be watching this because that's actually how you feel like right now, and asking that question about whether your resume has actually disappeared down that big black online hole when you've applied for a job. And I love this little cartoon because it probably sums it up really nicely about how people actually apply for a job and where their resume ends up. So my mission on this webinar is to explain to you what's going on behind the recruitment scenes so you know how to focus your job search efforts. So what is going on? So what do the numbers actually say? I found research from Jobvite. Now Jobvite are an applicant tracking system software provider. Try saying that 10 times fast, but basically what they do is they manage the systems. So not all, but a lot of recruiters and a lot of large employers have their software. So the software helps them post a job online, right through to tracking the success or tracking the stages or managing the process of people from the time that they apply right through to the time that they accept an offer. And organisations use this to manage the process, but also to look at the effectiveness of the different channels that they might use to attract people. So what Jobvite has access to with their systems is tracking of the applications. And so the big data tracking of 16 million applications shows the effectiveness of each way that people apply. So you can see that most people, 87.57, so let's say 90% of people, will typically stick an application in through a job board or a career site, yet less than 1% of hires are made that way. So less than 1% of applications are successful. So most people are applying that way, yet it's almost the least successful way of finding a job. Even lower for job boards, 0.58%. So if you're doing the spray and pray approach, these are the results that you can expect. Another applicant tracking company, Lever, tracked 4 million applications and how they went through their systems. And what they found was that companies hire almost 1 in 16 referred or recommended candidates. So candidates that had come via a recommendation from somebody else or were referred, compared to hiring 1 in 152 of people that had applied via an advertisement. And so again, that's under 1%. So it's pretty startling and pretty obvious that you're going to have a lot more success if you actually find a way of being referred or recommended to an organisation. So 1 in 16 compared to 1 in 152. So why does this happen? Well, pretty much it's because recruiters get overwhelmed. I mean, this is one reason that it happens. I'm going to go through some other reasons. But if you can imagine when you've got hundreds of resumes to look at, how do you actually make a good decision? I know when I was on the other side of the desk, I found it hard to be consistent in how I would rate resumes. So it ended up being, if I had 20 resumes in front of me, the top 5, but I couldn't guarantee whether they were the top 5 applicants for the role. I was just decision overload, decision overwhelm. And when we have too many to choose from, often what happens is we end up choosing none. So not saying that goes on in all of the cases, but, you know, if you could imagine what's happening on the other side of the desk when you fire off your resume on Seek or via another job board like Indeed, this is what's going on the other side of the desk. So why do so few people get hired by an advertisement? One of the promises that I said to you in this webinar was I'm going to share what goes on the other side. So the fact that we've got technology that makes it easy to apply for a job means that recruiters post jobs everywhere using the applicant tracking systems, and they get hundreds of people that just hit send. So they get hundreds of applications. So they've created a rod for their own back. The other thing that's happened is that, or that I do see, is that job advertisements can be really badly written. Quite often when you ring and ask about a job, the actual job is quite different, or the real priorities are quite different compared to what is actually the job actually does. So you might not be applying to what you think you're applying to. The other thing that you'll find is that recruiters shortlist on random transgressions, such as typos. Now, having a solidly written application is great, but sometimes typos get through in your application, and you'll find that recruiters can be really harsh on things like that. There are many people involved in the hiring process, but generally there's only one expert. So you could go for an interview or 6 or 7 interviews with the company and still nobody makes a decision. Often you'll find that jobs are advertised, but somebody's already in the role. Things can change within organisations and the job stays empty. Jobs get filled internally, and recruitment teams are often understaffed and undervalued. What this means for you on the other side of the desk is this. I'm applying for a job that I don't really understand because you haven't told me too much about it, or what you've told me about it doesn't really reflect what the job is. I can't reach anybody to tell me more about it because you'll have only shortlisted applications will be contacted, and you see that time and time again. Or there's a number on the bottom of the advertisement and nobody at the other end actually answering calls. So you've got all of that going on. I'm applying for a job that I don't understand. You haven't told me that much about it. I can't reach anybody, but I'm going to pitch myself as the perfect person for this job. And so from your perspective, that can be really frustrating. So typically what happens is that shows up in the quality of application that you're able to put in. But there are things that people do, and I routinely see all sorts of CVs, people ask me to review them, or when my clients come to see me with the before and ask me why they're not getting any traction, I typically see all sorts of things that are going to preclude you, are going to mean that you're not going to be shortlisted. So a lot of things that you guys do when you're applying for a job mean that your resume is not going to get through the door. So I'm saying this with love, with the intention of trying to help you, but I'm going to show you an example, just one example of a CV that doesn't do the person, the owner of the CV, any favours, and then I'm going to show you the after. So some things that you can do with your CV that are going to help you get shortlisted. Now, one of the reasons people come for my help is not just to recraft or help them recraft or reshape the CV, but it's also to get that outside of you and that injection of confidence around what it is that they really should be presenting, and that injection of clarity. So this is what people typically, I might see in a before. So, and you might look at this and recognise what you're presenting as well. So basically, on the CV, there's a lot of information that I, as a recruiter, if I put my recruiter's hat on, will need to wade through. So you can see that, people have things like their education and even high school education on the front page of their CV. You might be a senior manager and you might have something like that. You can use Word and Excel on the front page of your CV. So, excuse me, those things aren't going to help your case. And then typically what happens, and what I always see on CVs, is that I need to wade through a lot of information, and none of it stands out, and none of it jumps out at me and hits me in the eye. So I know that John Smith's applying for a job, but I'm going to base my judgment on hiring John Smith on whether his last job actually is actually the job that I'm hiring for. Not of and if it's not, it's a different title. I'm probably going to give John the flick, even though there's probably a lot of what John's done that is actually relevant to the role that I'm hiring for. So none of it jumps out. The resume is not going to pass that 10-second scan to go on the long list before the short list, because it's just not easy for me to read. So I'll just flick back to my slides here. What is a CV all about? Now, you'll read a lot on the internet about what you need to have in your CV. But I tend to go, I can talk about CVs until the cows come home, because that's what I do, and there's lots of things that might apply specifically to your situation. But really, the purpose of a CV is it's a marketing document, and 3 words for the writer, you, is to make the audience care. That's my job when I work with my clients, is to make someone care, and make someone care now, like make that CV jump out from the thousands in the pile. So your CV and your LinkedIn needs these things to hit the mark and to attract attention from recruiters. It needs some focus around the roles that you want to apply for. So it's a marketing document. It needs relevance to the role. It needs credibility. So the credibility is that it shows your value, but not just all your value. It's what's meaningful to the reader. It's you present the KPIs on your resume or your LinkedIn profile. You present your value in terms of being able to meet the KPIs of the role that you're interested in. And the last thing is that it's just easy to see. It's really easy to see all of the above. So I'm going to show you the after example of John Smith. So basically, after example is where I have worked with John Smith to refine and reshape his CV into something that hits people in the eye. Now, I do lots of different formats. I do visual representations of information that help as well, but this is a straightforward format. And I'm just going to put it in view 1 page so you can see I can make a decision about John Smith pretty quickly from his front page. So it's a snapshot, and then I decide whether I'm going to read further. And excuse me. This snapshot basically means that I can make a quick decision. It passes a 10-second scan. So you can see, I'll just rezoom it up to 100%. You can see that it tells me immediately that John Smith is an experienced marketing and communications manager. His background is not-for-profit, and he's an expert in stakeholder engagement. He's got his value proposition here. Now, the value proposition is written around the types of roles that he can add value in, because John and I sat down and did an audit of his skills and his strengths and looked to see where that actually helped direct his search. So his successes overall, if we had to have a overall value proposition, is turning big picture ideas into actions to inspire change. So he's a strategic marketing and communications manager. And 3 key things that he could offer that are meaningful to the types of roles were 3 key successes: that he successfully overhauled the brand communication and marketing channels, that he built a foundation of marketing best practice, and that he's got an outstanding record of stakeholder engagement demonstrated across diverse sectors. So you can see, I see instantly that he's a relevant applicant to me because he's told me up the top. I don't need to guess what he's aiming at. He's got three key value propositions around the type of job. A snapshot of his skills that helps with keywords, getting through applicant tracking systems, a snapshot of his experience, and then if I want to read further, everything's laid out in a consistent way. So I read through, I understand the context of the organisation, that it was the type of organisation that he worked for, what his purpose was, and then what his contributions were, and then they jump out. So this type of resume is a fairly straightforward type of resume, but it does work. And John started to get a lot of interviews after we reworked his resume. So another example of how to do that would be, again, Sam Jones, another different style of resume, but you can see with Sam it's laid out slightly differently. There's bold to be eye-catching, but we stamp it. Sam is a senior project manager, a major project manager, and he's worked in wealth management, superannuation and financial services. So that's come from an audit of what he wants to do and where he's most likely to find his next job, again with a value proposition. So what are 4 things that he could bring to his next job as a senior project manager? Not everything, just the relevant things. So 12 years experience, he's troubleshot and rescued mission critical projects, he's embedded best practice, and he's the go-to expert. And again, the bold actually helps those things stand out. So it's relevant, it's focused, it's relevant, it's targeted, it shows value in terms of what's valued by his next employer, what are the key things that he needs to address in his next job, and how could he demonstrate just those key things, and that's on the front page. So if your CV doesn't look anything like this, I would suggest you start to reshape it like that, and that's actually going to help you get through the applicant tracking systems and stand out to your next employer. And remember, focus around the role, relevance to the role you're applying for, credibility, demonstrating the right sort of value, and it's easy to see. It's not just a brain dump of your last 3 or 4 jobs and letting the recruiter guess. So the way that you apply for jobs, people typically apply for jobs, is get their resume in order, spray and pray. The way that you typically apply for a job doesn't help you get this clarity. So remembering that being recommended and referred increases your chances of getting a job compared to job boards and online career sites by 10 times. The numbers consistently across the board say that you've got to use your network. You've got to find a way to tap into that network, but being recommended and referred increases your chances of finding a job by 10 times or more. So how do you start to get that clarity? How do you start to get a really clear understanding of what your value proposition is, and then start to help your network help you find a job, or start to get recommended or referred into a job versus doing the spray and pray? It starts with you, but I just want to go back to this, to more research that I found with this. Other research has shown that 34% of internal recruiters trust referrals and recommendations versus only 7% trusting hires from outside recruiters. So that referral and recommendation, ramping up your job search by success rate by 10 times is actually proven in other data. So, we trust things that have come, like it's like short-circuiting a decision that you have to make. We trust things that come as recommendations and referrals from trusted people, when we choose to buy things. So who can help you get recommended or referred to a job? And there's a reason that I've put your buddies up here, and you'll find out that very shortly. So the research says that and this is research that's been done by both Facebook and LinkedIn, that your first degree connections are helpful, but you're more likely to find your next job through second degree connections. So they're the friends of your friends. So not necessarily, not necessarily your first degree, so people that you know quite well, but it's generally people that they know. And on LinkedIn, these are your second degree connections. So Facebook and LinkedIn research have said that that most people have found their job through the people that their friends know. So that's why LinkedIn is so powerful as a job search tool beyond actually applying for a job. Now, a lot of people say, I don't know anyone, but typically the median network size, and I like to use the word typical rather than median because that doesn't the word median doesn't have a lot of meaning to people. But network research shows that typically at your disposal, so to speak, or in terms of people that are in your network, you've got 472 people. So even if you think you know nobody, you actually do know more people than you think. And I had one of my clients that I supported through the straight to shortlist approach in terms of networking to find a job, actually only have, at the time, she had 27 connections on LinkedIn. She actually had returned to the UK. She wanted a role in HR. She'd been a mum and she was in Australia. So she wanted to get a job back in the UK, back in HR at a position that would suit her that was part-time. But she only had 27 connections on LinkedIn. Actually, she had none when we started working together. And by working through LinkedIn and recontacting her old connections, she didn't stumble across, we found her old boss. She reached out to them and ended up getting a job back in HR. Now, if she'd applied for a job, because she'd been out of HR for so many years in HR, she wouldn't have stood a chance. She'd be competing against thousands. But because she looked through her network, she was able to do that. So that's why I'm saying you know more people than you actually think. So part of the process that we go through in the Straight to Shortlist Challenge is actually that network mapping exercise. So where do you start? Where do you start your job search to attract and find the right opportunities and people? And start attracting or working out how you can leverage the power of your network and get recommended for jobs. Basically, it starts with you. Now, anybody that in the coaching and career development space, we all get you to do the same thing in different ways, but we all get you to go back to you. A self-directed job search versus, something that you're just spraying and praying with your career history or your job description type resume isn't the best place to start. The best place to start is to go back to you and really think about what your strengths are, what your skills are, what your values are, what you're proud of contributing, and how that might add value. It means that you can really express yourself on your CV and your LinkedIn profile. The things that you're looking for are meaningful to you, and you start to have what I call a compass for deciding whether a job is right or reaching out to the right people or reaching out to the right employers because you know yourself. And that kind of audit process starts you from a place of confidence. So you might have been in a place where you don't want to work anymore, but reflecting back on all of these things actually means that you've got a better starting point. So you're maybe not applying for stuff that you don't want to do just because you think you can get it. The research also shows that people that find jobs that are aligned to their strengths, that are aligned to their skills, that are aligned to their values, actually enjoy their job more, and people that enjoy their job more are more likely to invest in their job more and are more likely to be and again, this is proven by research, more likely to be promoted more often and enjoy more successful careers. So if you found yourself in the job market for the first time in a long time, absolutely go back to this. Go back to you. It's the greatest starting point for a compass for yourself. So then, as I said, this helps you direct your job search and who you want to work for. And this is the first part of the work that we do in the Straight to Shortlist Challenge. And it's the first part of the work that I do with my clients that are looking for help with their resumes and LinkedIn profiles. I'm going to introduce you to Shridhar. Shridhar was adopted exactly this approach in his job search, and we worked together on the first Straight to Shortlist Challenge. Now, one of the things that Shridhar said was really valuable in the process was actually working out what we called his value propositions, like how do his skills and strengths and experience actually add value to an organisation. So, and just as an aside, a great banner on your LinkedIn profile really helps you stand out, and should have found one that instantly people connected with. But on his LinkedIn profile, in his summary section or his about section, we summarised all of that together. So ask what he enjoys is there. Ask him what he could do all day, and that answer comes easy. I enjoy working on complex projects and issues requiring an in-depth knowledge across multiple technical areas. What are his strengths? Keeping up to date with technology, training team members and documentation. The values, so what he can offer, what his value propositions are, redefining or optimizing processes, rescuing troubled processes, improving customer satisfaction and team productivity. So this is where he's applied his skills to add value to an organisation. And this approach actually helped him define organisations he wanted to work for, define who'd he'd contact in his networking that we did as part of the challenge. It helped him filter out jobs that he didn't want. Also helped him talk with more confidence in interview as well. So those foundations actually came from an audit of himself. And where he ended up was we did the challenge back at the start of the year. So January, February, March, he rocked the challenge in terms of going all out there, and was headhunted for a job in New Zealand, based in Australia. He hadn't actually worked in Australia, he'd come from Singapore. And then a few months later, he applied the techniques we used in the Straight to Shortlist Challenge and landed a job, his dream job back in Australia. So, but it all started with that audit of himself, and then tapping into, the employers that he wanted to work for. So what comes next after that audit? What we do as part of the Straight to Shortlist Challenge, and what I suggest that you do, is look at your network and play the 6 degrees to Kevin Bacon LinkedIn game. I told you I use bad dad jokes, but there was this game that people used to play years ago, or this theory that everyone's connected to everybody else on the planet by 6 degrees, and the 6 degree of separation game. So how many people do you know that might know somebody that gets you to Kevin Bacon? It's the same sort of thing with your networking. How many people might know people that get you to talk to somebody within an organisation that you're interested in working for, or that have advertised a job. Now, people say that it's probably more likely with social media. That is, 3 degrees of separation now, so much shorter process to get to an organisation that you'd like to target. But the way to think about this is, who do you know that could introduce you to research an employer that you're interested in, perhaps have advertised a job, who could provide you with information on jobs in general, who could give you insight on a career that you're interested in, and who's connected in your sector that might be be able to introduce you to people and jobs. So that's where your network comes in. That's where you can leverage the power of being referred. In the Straight to Shortlist Challenge, what we do is a technique called informational interviews. So it's basically looking at people that are doing jobs that you're interested in doing, and asking for their advice. And often that kind of approach, the conversation then at the end turns to, well, what are you interested in doing? And quite often people then start to be helpful in your job search, or tell you about jobs they know, or think about you when a job's coming up. So the 6 Degree to Kevin Bacon LinkedIn game. LinkedIn's a really powerful tool for helping you see who your friends are connected to, or who your immediate network is connected to, that you wouldn't know if you wouldn't know that information if you weren't using LinkedIn. So another person that has recently done the Straight to Shortlist Challenge, again adopted that approach on his LinkedIn profile. It's reflected with what he enjoys. Could say commercial acumen is in my DNA. I've found from a global management career in banking and financial services, there are 3 things that motivate me: the opportunity to grow and add value, to collaborate with others, and see real results from the work that we do. His value proposition, he was going after two roles, risk management and consulting. From his resume alone, he wouldn't have gotten a consulting role, because he'd been out of consulting for quite a while. So what we did was we mapped out his network and started to work out how he could set up some informational interviews with people in management consulting that could give him advice. And this was what we sent out. So mapped out his network and started to contact them. And this is an example of a reach out email that we did as part of the Straight to Shortlist Challenge. Now, in the Straight to Shortlist Challenge, we craft these emails individually, so they're really personal. But basically, my client here reached out to a top 4 consultant, a top 4 partner, explained how he knew them, and asked if we could have a brief conversation because he was looking for his advice. And what happened from that is he started to get meetings with top 4 management consultants, top 4 partners, and popped into my email on LinkedIn just the other day with this message. Got a call from a big firm for an informational interview directly by a partner. I learned I was recommended by one of my initial contacts that I identified as part of the challenge. The real win for me in this case was that the Big 4 partner waited almost a month to accommodate my changing situation. I see this as nothing else but the power of referral. I landed 3 interviews after the program ended. So defining himself, defining the network, reaching out to that network, starting to tap into the power of being referred. Fantastic result. So what does what I've said mean for you and your job search? Okay, so the tips are, you're not setting yourself up well if you just focus on advertised jobs. It starts with you, not what's advertised. So it starts with that audit of you. Your LinkedIn profile becomes a much more powerful tool in your resume, because your LinkedIn and being on LinkedIn enables you to see who's in your network that can assist you. You're more connected than you realize. And that you need to find out ways to have your network help you at this stage. Now, networking isn't all about you. It's about the relationships that you create and how you help others. But we've found in the Straight to Shortlist Challenge that there's a surprising number of strangers that are willing to actually help you. And jobs are closer than you think. So, I mentioned in my communication around this webinar that I was going to talk to you about how many jobs are actually hidden. So you hear lots of experts say, oh yes, there's 80% of jobs are hidden. So, but I've never been able to see that research, and I've looked and I've looked and I've looked and I've looked, and even when I've seen white papers quoted by the Big 4 in terms of the employment market, they say, oh yes, 80% of jobs are hidden, but I can't find the research that says that. But what I have been able to find is that the big data research that shows that you can ramp up your chances of success by 10 times if you find a way to get recommended or referred. This kind of process gives you clarity because you're finding out more information about jobs, either as they're being advertised or before they're being advertised, because you're speaking more directly to people. What we found in the Straight to Shortlist challenge when we've run it, and actually in the last challenge that I ran, that we had 60% strike rate. So 60% strike rate is people that have said yes to meetings. So when we reached out to people, either directly by email or via LinkedIn, 60% of those people overall said yes to a meeting, and a 50% strike rate when these emails were cold. So when that person had no previous connection with the person that we were reaching out to. And we did it in different ways. We did it via email, we did it via LinkedIn, and on one occasion we actually, with another person that I worked with, we actually sent an old-fashioned letter. So what I've found in this approach, where we've reached out to employers or reached out to a network in general, is through working with other people in this way, that we've generally had a 25 to 50% success rate in people saying yes to meetings, and some of those meetings have led to jobs. So that's what you can expect generally working with me one-on-one or working on the Straight to Shortlist challenge, where we approach people directly, is that kind of strike rate. And I say it's far more empowering than looking at something like this. And I find this ironic because this is a job to help people find jobs. So you would think that they would be more attuned to what it's like to look for a job when they're advertising for specialists. So typically you'll see key requirements, what you will have, what you need to demonstrate, But then they say at the bottom, please do not hesitate to apply ASAP if you think you might be a suitable applicant to this role. Unfortunately, we're not able to answer your queries prior to you applying. So it's all about them, and you need to demonstrate all of these things. You may well not know exactly what you're applying for, and you can't find out information about it. And so, as I mentioned before, that's one of the big reasons that there's such a mismatch between the strike rate of job boards and career sites is less than 1%. So let's talk about Straight to Shortlist and how this process or following this methodology can actually help you find a job. And then what I'm going to do is then open the curtains to the step-by-step methodology that we use in the Straight to Shortlist challenge. So here's the methodology, and here's how in the Straight to Shortlist challenge we get you meetings, 5 meetings. So we make you the star of the show. We then name your top target people and employers. We then work on your LinkedIn profile. We then create communication to get out to those people, and then we ramp it up with some booster sessions. So that's the same methodology that you could apply. Do that audit on yourself. Look at what that tells you about where you want to apply your efforts in terms of employers, sort out your LinkedIn profile, create ways to get communication to get to organise those informational interviews or those meetings, and then go hard. So let's break this down in terms of opening up the curtains for the Straight to Shortlist challenge. So in Module 1, what we do is we make you the star of this show. So we unpack what you've contributed in previous roles, what you've enjoyed doing and your strengths. Then we turn it into a compass to define your value propositions and what you can offer a future employer. So this helps you, guide you towards your ideal employer, gives you confidence to make that next move, and as Shruda's experience was, it gives you confidence in future job interviews. So Module 2, we then look through what that information tells you in terms of employers that you could target. And we build out your list. We build out your list of contacts and employers from understanding that template. And so we use that technique called the 6 degrees to Kevin Bacon. We also use a technique of finding boosters. So what we found is there are people that just intrinsically understand the value of networking and have a lot of connections themselves. So we find those boosters. We also find events that you can attend that help you build up your network. Often we've picked up contacts that people have just met very briefly at an event and reached out to them again via LinkedIn to set up meetings. And then what I also give you in this module is my proven and little known job search hack that uses both Google and LinkedIn to find really interesting people. What people find with this session is that there might be a bunch of people that you want to reach, but you don't know whether it's appropriate to or not. So working with me helps you understand whether you can or not. And there's dozens more people than you actually think. And in this part of the program, I put my head on your shoulders and think, well, if I was in your situation doing what you want to do with your set of skills, who are people that could give me valuable information about the next move? And I come up with a bunch of people to get you started as well. So we map out a list of people that you might approach to help you with your job search. We work up your LinkedIn profile. So tend to set these up so your value comes out. Often people can be confused about how to express things on your LinkedIn profile if there are 2 sets of roles that you'd like to go for or 3 sets of roles. We can make that really clear on your profile. So out of this process, what you get is a very strong LinkedIn profile because I help you set it up, but I edit it for you and cast my eyes over it. So basically that helps more people say yes when you reach out to connect. It also helps you start to be on the radar of headhunters as well. So, people start to be attracted to your profile. I get you moving and contacting people early in this process because I think that's the thing that people most fear. As I said, I've done this hundreds of times for myself now to create opportunities and worked with a lot of people through the Straight to Shortlist Challenge to do that as well. So there's many and varied ways, but I'm actually, I'm giving you that experience based on my own experience. So here's an example of a previous client that I worked with on the Straight to Shortlist Challenge and what his LinkedIn profile ended up looking like. So we worked together one-on-one actually as part of the process. And he was from Singapore, I think, previously, just arrived in Melbourne, wanted to put himself in the best position possible to find his next job. So we started working out his value proposition that you can see here, driving cost efficiencies, troubleshooting, risk management, reducing cost of non-conformance, and set up his LinkedIn profile. And what he did next was basically jumped on Facebook and instant messaged an old contact that was here in Australia who put him in touch with an employer. He got interviewed and got the job, but he said basically that process of defining his value proposition and putting that on his LinkedIn profile made it very easy for people to quickly understand what he was about and also helped him explain his value more concisely in interview. So Kim Han is another example of somebody who's used the approach. So back to what's in the program. Module 4 is creating compelling communication. So we write those emails that you get to send out that help people say yes to a meeting or an interview. Most of the time we look at boosters, people that I call boosters or informational type interviews. We do go direct. And that has worked. So there's a balance of what's most appropriate depending on what your network looks like and what your goals are. Then what we do, I call this execute and accelerate. So basically, for a couple of sessions in the Straight to Shortlist program, we do a booster session. So we sit down collectively, do a day's work in 2 hours as a group. we start to send those emails out. And what I find is this works extraordinarily well because it seems to be the collective energy of the group. I also give you, as part of this program, some interview practice. So an informational interview, for example, isn't like a traditional job interview, but it does turn into one sometimes. So I give you a framework of the questions that you can ask to get people talking, and we do some practice as well. And then we celebrate. So we, in the program, we basically work out a way to keep momentum going forward, the things that you actually need to keep moving and doing. I also have ongoing support. So once a week for 4 weeks after the program, we connect up together back on Zoom to do it and, recap on what's working, what we need to refine, what's not working, keep the confidence going. And then after that, I have a LinkedIn group, or not after that, I invite people into my private LinkedIn group where there are other people that have worked through the challenge, and I give people a lot of support, answer a lot of questions, and post a lot of helpful material in that as well. So as you go through the program, people will ask you for a CV. And so what I've done in this new program is included some training on getting your CV in order, so you can have it look as sharp as those CVs that I showed you earlier. So we'll give you templates that have worked for clients, and some training on how to get your CV to look like that. The work that you've done for your LinkedIn profile, you can use, generally people use that as a template to populate their CV, but with a CV you tend to need to target it around a specific job. So this training actually helps you do that. And here's where people have gotten meetings and found jobs. So Treasury Wine Estate, EY, SBS, Coles, Protiviti, Visy, NZ, Qenos, Australian Broadcasting Commission, National Australia Bank, Joval Wines. I'm not going to go through them all, but you can see there's a long list and still counting. So in red are where these meetings have actually turned into interviews. EY, SBS, Coles, Protiviti, Visy, ABC, National Australia Bank, Joval Wines, Brainmates, Blue Gum Pharmaceuticals, Endeavour College of Natural Health, Deloitte. So generally, as I mentioned before, it's kind of like an informational interview to start off with, but then a referral comes out of that. So amazing results. I love this program because instead of spray and pray, it actually helps people get tangible results. Now, what I found with the program are there are some people that actually go gun and take advantage of the challenge to get the 5 meetings. Some people sit back and treat it like training. All good. And some people apply it and continue to apply it after. In this process, it's your mindset that's really important. Because you will get rejections. I've given you the numbers on people that say yes to meetings. So 50% of people say yes to meetings, 50% say no to meetings. But knowing those numbers actually means that it's not personal. So this process, I think, really does help people not take it so personally. So who it works best for? I don't say that this is for everybody. I don't want it to be for everybody. I don't market it as something, as a cure for everybody, because there are people that have very specific needs that this program doesn't work for, people that are not ready, and people that are in different sectors. So I say it works for white collar professionals. So if you're in an office, if you're in Australia and you have permission to work in Australia, it works for. So if you're overseas and out of the time zone that we work, it doesn't work as well. But if you're in Australia and have permission to work in Australia, it works. It works if you know what you want to do next, but you're finding it hard to break through the recruiter barrier. It works if you know you need to network to find a job or change careers, but you don't know how to go about it. It works if you're new to Australia and know you need to build your local network to find a job, but you're not sure how to start. It works if you're willing, even if you're a bit nervous to try new things. So you don't have to be an out-and-out extrovert to do this. Quite often, more introverted people are better at this because they're more considered in their approach, and get better results because they're more targeted. So you don't have to be an out-and-out extrovert. I'm not an out-and-out extrovert. But you do have to be willing to try new things and put yourself out of your comfort zone. And you'll be fully supported by me during that process. And it works if you're the type of person who keeps going even when things get a bit tough. So your mind can be going, people won't get back to me, people will reject me, recruiters don't but you actually just keep going through that, because we have a very big negativity bias as human beings, which is actually not a reflection on reality. So I've found, I've been able to just keep going with this scenario, like with approaching people even when I don't think it's going to work, because it does. So this program isn't for you if you're in a trade or a blue collar or the type of sector that's not on LinkedIn. It doesn't work for you if you're completely lost and have no idea what to do next. If you're in that scenario, a career counsellor is probably a better person for you to speak to. It doesn't work for you if you're not prepared to do the work. You'll get the most out of the program in the 5 weeks and in total a couple of months in terms of the support, if you focus your energy and intensity around that time, because that's when you get the support. It won't work for you if you just prefer to complain about the unfairness of it all rather than actually taking action. And it won't work for you if you're not comfortable on LinkedIn. So the next challenge starts on October the 30th. My offer to people that were watching the Zoom call live was, if you signed up before 10 tomorrow, you get a free hour free job search consultation with me. That offer still stands. I've got 3 spots left on the challenge, but yeah, we're starting next Wednesday, October the 30th. If you email me at carolyn@interviewiq.com.au, you'll find information about the challenge on my website. There's a link to click straight through to be taken to the Straight to Shortlist challenge. So the promise of the program is that you get 5 meetings with 5 employers over the course of the program in 5 weeks. If you do the work, if you demonstrate that you're coachable and you don't get 5 meetings, you get your money back. Now the fee for the program is 1497 plus GST. I'm planning on increasing the price up to 1997 very shortly, because I think that's the market value of the program. I'd like you to think of this as an investment, not a cost. I have a lot of people that go, gee, that seems like a lot of money, but then, how much is it costing you being out of the workforce? And as I said, people apply the techniques that they lose in the program, that they use in the program time and time again, to create jobs. And I've spoken to people that have graduated from the program, and we've had a recap of how they're going. And it turns out that they've had their meetings applying the techniques that we've used. So it's a skill set that you can use throughout your career to help you get where you need to go and to help you accelerate your chances of finding your next great job. So we're starting October the 30th. Feel free to reach out to me by replying to this email if you're interested. I'd love to see you on board. I love doing this program. I love seeing people get results. And if you've got any questions, please reach out to me directly. And I'll see you on the other side.